Welcome back to the Moot Workshop. We're going to be restoring the speaker for the Brunswick Model 15 radio from 1930. As you can see, it's incredibly rusty. We're going to take this entirely apart and refurbish all the individual pieces, this time on the Moot Workshop.
Closely with research. This is a
So the first thing we have to do is take this felt bumper off of here. It's basically like felt weather stripping. And then we have to address the speaker cone, which has been repaired by some previous person by basically taping it to the frame with masking tape, which has now gone all crispy. We have to cut through all of that to get this cone out of here. Okay, now that the cone is loose, I'm going to restore this in a separate video because it's a pretty long and involved process on its own. There's a piece of string running through the main cable that goes to the speaker, and it's tied to this one lug on this terminal strip. It's kind of used as a strain relief for the cable. Unlike most modern speakers, this has an electromagnet instead of a permanent magnet. That big black thing you see in there is a coil. It's the field coil for the magnet. This cylindrical can is actually a transformer. It's the output transformer from the radio to the speaker. I'm drilling out the rivets that are holding it to the case. Okay, time to take the field coil apart. This additional coil underneath a field coil is called a bucking coil. This is actually used to create a sort of an inverse version of any of the hum that comes through the system, so it cancels out the hum. It's the same technique that's used in guitar pickups. Now it's time to apply the rust remover. After several minutes, we'll wash the chemicals off in the sink. The smaller parts will drop into some evaporust, and we'll leave them in there overnight. Now it's time to hit the speaker chassis with the wire wheel one more time. Now we're going to switch to emery cloth, starting from coarser grits to lighter grits. Emery cloth is basically just sandpaper for metal. And we're going to try to get this as smooth as possible, but there's a lot of pitting from the rust, so we're not going to get it perfect, but it'll look a lot better when we're done. Now we'll switch to the polishing wheel and shine it up. And there we go, not too shabby. Now we'll give the field coil frame the same treatment. And the same for the speaker cone frame. Time to wash off the smaller pieces of hardware and give them the wire wheel treatment as well. We already restored the cone in a separate video, so the next thing we're going to work on is the field coil. I'm running a lot of this footage back at 2 and maybe even 4 times normal speed because you don't want to see me screwing in screws for 45 minutes. I think you'd lose your mind. Whoops, I just realized I'd forgot to put a washer in. Since the original insulation is in such bad shape, I'm going to protect these wires with some clear heat shrink tubing. Now we'll turn our attention to the output transformer. I couldn't find a spray paint match for the original olive color. I didn't think it was that important to match it perfectly, so I picked this nice dark green. This insulation, which is probably asbestos, is very fragile, and I'm going to replace it with some heat shrink tubing. Now I'll work on the terminal strips that hang on the back of the speaker cone frame. So here's the capacitor that's in line with the tone control. And I don't trust capacitors in old devices, especially not a 91-year-old radio. And here's the equivalent capacitor in today's technology. But I don't want to replace this capacitor with this other one. I mean, aesthetically, this is just really cool. But what I can do is I can hollow this out, put this inside of it, cap it off on the ends, and have the aesthetics be exactly the same as the original, but have it be functionally a new capacitor. So the first thing I got to do is dig into this. I don't actually know exactly what the inside of this is going to be like, so I'm going to just very, very carefully cut into the sides of this thing and try to hollow it out. First thing I'm going to do is put some blue tape on it to keep the outside of the tube from getting dirty, because it would be sad to go to all this trouble to make it look beautiful and then mess it up by getting black goop all over it. I think a good replacement for the pitch that this was originally filled with is this black epoxy sculpt, basically two-part epoxy putty. Now we'll refurbish the wiring harness that runs from the chassis of the radio to the speaker. The wire I'm using here looks like it's an authentically old wire because it has a cloth jacket on the outside, but inside it's modern insulation. And the reason I'm replacing these wires is not chiefly because the wires themselves are bad. They're not that bad, but there's a jacket on the outside, a fabric jacket that binds them all together like a cable, and it's really frayed and nasty looking. I'm just going to replace the whole wiring harness just to make sure that everything is going to be okay. The new wires are just a tiny bit thicker than the originals, so I'm going to grit my teeth and remount the back of the plug just a little so there's a little more room for the wires. Okay, the last item on our list to restore is the tone control. It's a Bradleyometer patent pending, which is basically a variable resistor. It's gummed up. You can barely turn it, so we're gonna have to take the back off it and clean it out. See, it's all I can do to turn it with these pair of pliers. That'll never do. I'm going to replace the wires with the same kind of modern wires with the authentic looking fabric insulation on the outside. Okay, we've got all the parts refurbished, including the speaker cone, which is the subject of its own video. So we need to now put it all back together, which we will do next time on the Moot Workshop. Hi, thanks for watching. If you really liked that video, please click the like button. And if you like what we do in general, please subscribe, because that not only lets YouTube know that you like us, but it also lets you know when we have a new video, and we do post a new video every week. And if you really want to encourage this behavior, head on over to our Patreon, because your contributions will help us get exhibits for the museum, but more importantly, it'll help buy us parts and supplies that we need to refurbish and otherwise restore these items so that they work and they're in the best condition they can be. Thanks again.